And welcome to a on-the-road edition of Gridiron Nation. I'm Jim Mullin. I'm in Krefeld, Germany. Why am I here, do you ask? Well, I am the vice president of IFAF, and I'm here attending the European Final Four Men's Tackle Football Championship, where Germany lost to Austria. Surprised a lot of people the other night in a terrible torrential rainstorm with shearing winds. I couldn't think of worse football weather than what we experience here in the Rhineland. But there's also the final coming up now, which features Austria and Finland, and Germany will take on Italy, not only in the bronze medal game, but also in the first ever game of the Gridiron Nations Championship. So let's switch back to Gridiron Nation, and we'll bring in Gord Randall. Gord, I appreciate you coming on in our podcast version with us on the road, using these resources on the road. And we're going to do something also unusual. We're going to lead with U Sports, because the one result that I couldn't get over, even though I'm on the other side of the Atlantic, was the result with Guelph winning on a walk-away rouge at the end of the game with an 18-17 win at Western. We saw some cracks in the Western foundation as this season went along, but I don't think any of us expected this.
No, absolutely shocking results. I would say as shocking as I've seen in years at this level. And you're right, like the writing was maybe there for us if we wanted to read it about Western, but we kept kind of excusing it as, well, it's Western. Like they've been such a dominant force in the OUA for so long. They'll get it together. And yet on the heels of that whooping that they got from Laurier just over a week ago, they couldn't recover. And again, the story is for them that the offense was just not clicking. It's a very young offense at Western, but again, it's one of those programs. It's kind of like Laval. You just expect them to reload year after year, and you don't necessarily put a lot of stock into these specific names or the specific levels of experience. But it turns out that actually was a factor. And in particular, the aerial attack just couldn't get going. Evan Hillett could not get things going and develop a rapport with his playmakers to put points up on the board, and give a full credit to the Guelph coaching staff and their defense. Put up an excellent effort this week. I think from what I saw, I thought I saw indications of them watching the film and seeing the things that Windsor and Laurier did to work to shut Western down and trying to lean on those things themselves. And they were able to do so successfully. And on the other side of the ball, I mean, Guelph only scores 18 points in this game. So it's hard to point a lot of fingers at that Western defense, but it just all around wasn't good enough. And that's 2 weeks in a row. Not only are they losing, they're losing at home, which is basically unprecedented in the Greg Marshall era, which has been, 15 plus years now. So it really feels like a real end of a chapter here with Western going out this way. And now, of course, the chatter's already starting about, Greg Marshall's no spring chicken. Is he maybe nearing the end of the line? And so it could be the beginning of a really, really interesting offseason in London, Ontario.
Yeah, Greg Marshall's already communicated to the community there coming into this season that he's getting towards the end of the line. You can only go for so long. And there might be a future for him in university management, like fundraising, because he has a tremendous profile throughout that community in London, Ontario. But is this the time for a change at Western? Are they not maybe feeling the ill effects of a bad recruiting season when their lead recruiter was also in the process of moving on to another job? Is there not an opportunity here for maybe a bounce back season for Greg Marshall and the Western program coming up next year? Or is there the possibility, even as, like I had mentioned, cracks in the foundation, there might be some competition for that job already, and competition creates infighting in organizations. It is just natural. It's hard to get insight from about 30,000 feet up on this piece. What is the best direction from where you stand right now for the next steps for this Western program?
Yeah, it's tough to say for sure, right? Like Marshall's fingerprints are all over not just that program, but that university, as you alluded to. And so kind of ushering him towards the door, I don't think feels like it will go over particularly well. That being said, it's hard for an older coach to recover after a setback like this when you have other coaches in the conference, other rivals around you that have younger coaches that have more positive momentum in their corner. Like I would say that it's pretty, undisputed at this point in time that, former Western quarterback Michael Faulds and his program at Laurier have surpassed Western in the OUA. And the question is, does another former Greg Marshall assistant and Steve Snyder maybe at Queens take advantage of the chaos here and take that leap? Western has always put that dominant team on the field, but has not necessarily been head and shoulders above the rest, above some of their rivals in terms of recruiting at all times. And so, you have these OUA teams that are used to competing with Western and taking the odd victory from them, that potentially are in a position to jump into this vacuum. So whatever Western does decide to do, they're going to have to reload pretty quickly here because, there will be the sharks in the water seeing these results, and young, energetic coaches across the conference that might finally have an opportunity after years of oppression from this Western program dominating that conference. You finally have that opportunity. It wouldn't surprise me if you see multiple programs throw an all-out attack at trying to fill that void as quickly as they possibly can.
Well, the funny thing with Western is I'm not sure if there's an alumni group out there that is more focused and internally aggressive when it comes to pushing the football program along. And I'm sure that they will be loud and they will be heard as we go into this off season. And I wonder what sort of role they'll play. One of the things that I loved about and me, Mr. Traditionalist when it comes to Canadian football, was the end of that game. And having sat in press boxes around the Canada West and knowing how loosely organized they are, when you hear a play-by-play announcer calling the final play as a field goal goes wide and the returner is taking it wide, it's not occurring to him that the returner, at least, that he should kick the ball. And the play-by-play announcer has prompted him to say, kick the ball. And you hear voices in that booth around him, kick the ball. Why aren't you kicking the ball?
Snap is back, hold is down, kick is up, and it's wide. And Robertson looking for room. Robertson doesn't have room, throws it back. Why didn't he kick the ball?
Hearing all of that breakdown in that booth at that one time was just, Gord, it was chef's kiss. It was chef's kiss to end a game for me from my position, where it came down to that one uniquely Canadian play. And quite frankly, at the university level, I'd love to see them keep the goalposts and keep the returns in place like that. What are your thoughts on the closeout of that game?
I mean, it's not just quintessential for me of why we love Canadian football. It's also quintessential why we love college football, is that there's just that roughness around the edges that makes for moments like that. I think about that. I think about, the student broadcaster at Queens absolutely losing his mind over an interception a couple years ago. Like you have these moments where, I'm not going to call it lack of professionalism, but just that little bit of lack of polish on some of the players in place and some of the systems in place creates these moments. Like, it would not surprise me. I saw suggested that was probably Western spotters, their coaches, that you could hear in the background on this call going, kick it, kick it, kick it. And you just don't get that in pro football. And so those types of things, I think for me, it adds to that wackiness of college football, both north and south of the line, that it keeps you coming back for more, because you just never know what kind of just random craziness you're going to get at any point in time.
Yeah, in the old Manitoba press box, when coaches used to get mad, they'd punch the wall, and you wondered if you'd see a fist come through the drywall into your broadcast location, because you could hear it through the headsets. You could hear coaches lose their you-know-what during certain plays or certain calls, and you knew it was going over the air. It was classic in that sense. Speaking of something that was classic, UBC going into Regina and winning, that's a classic for UBC because they rarely do that. They have all kinds of problems in Regina. And to close out a season, they needed to win, and they were in, and they had the Friday night to do it, and they went ahead and did it. And they're in the playoffs, facing a foe on the road in a place where UBC teams traditionally do not do well, Griffith Stadium in Saskatoon. Your thoughts on UBC finding a way into the playoffs and then the road ahead of them?
Well, I kind of alluded to it last week when giving a breakdown of the Canada West playoff scenarios that, I've watched a lot of this UBC team this year as I've been on their home broadcasts. And what I've consistently seen is a team that just isn't getting out of its own way often enough and not making things easy on itself. And what I saw from this, which was limited to be clear, but what I saw from this game was they cut back on the penalties. They cut back on there weren't significant turnover problems. And so they got out of their own way. And most importantly, their first-year kicker, Alex Hilliard, in just his third career game, goes perfect on kicks, including the game winner in overtime. I mean, it's the type of stuff that is legendary in different contexts. And what I loved most, by the way, and I don't know if this was deliberate or just coincidental, but the kicker celebration for Hilliard afterwards, which was almost exactly the same as Quinn Van Gilswick's when he won the Vanier Cup back in 2014. It was almost exactly the same with the windmill, the third base coach, Snelly. Yeah, the only difference being that Alex Hilliard looks like he might be a sophomore in high school still at this point in time. But otherwise, it was a great scene and a UBC program that against all odds got it done. But this is what I've seen from them is that they have not been out of games this year. And I understand that, both Saskatchewan games look lopsided in the box score at the end of it. But you watch those games and it's games in which an inexperienced UBC team makes more critical mistakes than the other team does and just shoots themselves in the foot as much as the other team beats them. So if they can put a clean game on the field, they're going to get a third crack at Saskatchewan here. And looking ahead, Saskatchewan, still the status of Anton Amundrud is up in the air. Jack Farrell, the backup quarterback, played again this week, and he has done, to be very clear, he's done a very passable job as a fill-in for Amundrud, but he is not the experienced hand that Anton Amundrud is. And so this represents potentially an opportunity for an underdog to come in and pull off an upset, because this UBC team and the UBC defense in particular held up quite nicely against Saskatchewan a couple weeks ago in their last regular season matchup. And so if they can get out of their own way and avoid these series of sequences where they put themselves on a downslope like they did in that last Saskatchewan game, then UBC's got a real shot here.
Who's your U Sports Player of the Week this week?
I'm going to go with Alex Hilliard, and I know I just talked about him, but I like I said, what a legendary performance from a young kid being thrust into a tough situation. Kieran Flannery Fleck was a fifth-year guy. He's kicked, it feels like, forever at this level, and he was a pro that had everything in. Hilliard probably never planned on playing a meaningful down this season, and then Flannery Fleck blows a groin in their homecoming game, and all of a sudden, he's thrust right into the spotlight. And since getting into that position in those last 3 regular season games, there were a couple of shaky moments, and frankly, he didn't punt great in this game, but as a place kicker, he was outstanding, and in a clutch situation, comes through for his team with their entire season on the line. You've got to tip your hat to that, and I hate giving too much credit to kickers, but you got to tip your hat to that performance.
High school football coaches nominate your players for the NFL Canada Way to Play Awards. Each week, winners earn a $3,000 equipment grant for their school program. Show us game footage that highlights safe, proper technique, and impactful play. Winners announced weekly on NFL Live and on NFL Canada's social channels. Learn more at nfl.com/CA Way to Play. Okay, back in the hotel lobby at the Krefelderhof. See, I'm learning, Gord. I'm learning. I'm picking up a little bit of German, or at least the accent, as we lean into our NCAA and our NCAA Canadians. And as usual, unless your name is Antoine Raymond, we are focusing on defense right across the board with some impressive efforts on the defensive side of the ball this week.
Yeah, Darius McKenzie's team finally wins. He racks up 9 tackles at South Alabama, so that was an impressive performance for a few weeks in a row now, McKenzie's really been coming on strong in that Jaguars defense. Ty Benefield just keeps on doing his thing, just keeps being the lead dog of that Boise State defense. Boise's getting into kind of the doldrums of their schedule right now. They have officially a rivalry game this upcoming week, but it's about an 18-point spread. So it's getting into this Mountain West schedule where it highlights, I think, how Boise will benefit from moving to the newly formed Pac-12 again next year. A few more competitive games, I think. But the guy I want to focus on, and we're back to Louisville, but this time it's not Rene Conga who's the focal point. It's Wesley Bailey. 2 sacks for Wesley Bailey in Louisville's win this week, as they continue to roll in the ACC and are moving very quickly from dark horse status to real contender status in that conference. And it's starting to look like, frankly, in my opinion, that it's kind of a 2-horse race, and it's a 2-horse race between Louisville and Georgia Tech. Undefeated Georgia Tech added another big victory this weekend. So an interesting season in the ACC, and Louisville is coming on strong. I keep saying it on this program. Jeff Brom's done a fantastic job with that program and his alma mater and built them up into a legitimate contender year after year. And this time around, of the 2 Canadians on that defensive line, it's Bailey who shines, as Rene Conga flies under the radar, but keeps doing his thing in the interior as well.
Yeah, Wesley Bailey is a good news story when it comes to a transfer. He was falling into the shadows, had some injury issues at Rutgers. The change has really done him well to make the trek over to Louisville, hasn't it?
Very much so. And it's another example of, we've talked about how the transfer portal can kind of go both ways for guys, right? We've seen the cautionary tales of guys that tried to find greener pastures and it didn't work out for them. And we've seen the success stories, right? Wesley Bailey, Curtis Rourke, we'll probably talk about it a little later, Melvin Ciani, Malcolm Bell, like all of those types of guys that just needed to find the right spot and the right fit for them and get themselves a chance to shine, and they were able to shine. So Bailey's just another example of that. And what we're seeing is that of our prominent Canadians, like more often than not, these guys have transferred, and that's just the reality of the NCAA in 2025, is that it's more likely that guys have transferred than haven't transferred at any point in their career with the way the current landscape is.
It would appear that Akeem Messidor is struggling with injuries again. How frustrating is that after what we've seen him go through, especially through last year? Barely got a start, was shelled for most of it. Once again, this is something that's likely going to hurt his draft status.
Absolutely it is, because when it becomes a repeated pattern, teams start to take notes of that, right? And then it becomes not just these things happen, but it starts to become a real, maybe this is a medical red flag. And it's really duly frustrating for Messidor, I think, because his team was in the driver's seat for a college football playoff berth, and a pretty bad loss a couple weeks ago against Louisville potentially takes them out of that driver's seat. And he can't be around to help them. So they were able to bounce back on the field in a big way. They blew Stanford out this week, but it's always frustrating, I think, because he also was gaining some real personal momentum as well, right? Him and Reuben Baines Jr. were the most fearsome pair of rush ends in the entire country while they were playing together healthy, and he was earning every bit of it, but he was also getting put into that spotlight because he was playing and matching the play in a lot of ways with a guy that is likely to be, a watery pick, to borrow a basketball term, in the draft this upcoming spring. So it looked like everything was starting to really come together for Messidor. He was in the biggest spotlight possible. He was performing. He's got savvy. He's got a well-rounded game, and he was shooting up draft boards. And then depending on how long this sets him back, all of a sudden, now that momentum, that positive momentum, that has been completely lost. So yeah, definitely a frustrating step back for a guy at this point in his career and at this point in his season.
Who is your NCAA player of the week this week?
Mine is Wesley Bailey, and he pops up as a guy that just makes critical splash plays. And as I noted, Louisville is right squarely in the thick of things in the ACC, and we love to see our Canadian guys performing on teams that are relevant in the larger picture of things, because too often it feels like over the years we've been doing this, Jim, that we've been focusing on a Canadian who's been an absolute standout, and we've had a tough time trying to pitchfork talking about them into the show because their team's going 2-9 or something like that, and they're largely irrelevant. I think of Elikai Amanar, who, of course, we still talked about, and we're already seeing that he's an NFL stud as a rookie already, but it makes it so much easier for us when we can sit down and watch those games on Saturday night and tell you guys to go and watch those games on Saturday night of teams that are actually going to provide a high entertainment value and good football on the field week after week. So he fits that mold too.
And welcome back. I know you never left. Anyway, let's see what Alex has for us in Border Ballers. Is it a trick? Is it a treat? Is it a rock?
Welcome back to Border Ballers. I'm a pumpkin who at my current weight will win a blue ribbon at the county fair this year. And it's getting real scary in college football this Halloween, especially with Floyd Boucard around. USC's freshman from Montreal has one of the best pressure rates in the country at around 15%. He's been injured over the last couple of weeks, but once he's ready to go, he'll be a freight train once again. Another monster you don't want to find under your bed this Halloween is Ottawa's own Natal Frangioni. Georgetown's D-tackle got in a couple of sacks stealing Bucknell's candy bucket this weekend. He had another half sack earlier this season and will look to make more noise at Lehigh on Saturday. Let's stay in the FCS for a 2-for-1 in Maine because Nick Krugy and Noah Stanley have yet to allow a sack between them on that Black Bears O-line. They've allowed 7 pressures combined through 9 weeks and will continue playing with the protective spirit of a mother hen hosting Stony Brook this weekend. That's it for Border Ballers. I'll see you on Saturday, but you're not taking my candy.
There it is, our CFC 50, the top 10 high school programs in the country for this week. By the way, if you're a high school football player born in 2009 to 2011, head on over to CanadaFootballChat.com to register now for the CFC Evaluation Camp Tour. Stop in one of 9 locations across Canada for your chance to play in the 2026 CFC Prospect Game on TSN. Well, Gord, we're in the heart of the season for the NCAA, and we're into playoff season for U Sports. So let's start with the NCAA, and what do you got for your game of the week?
My game of the week this week is going to be a kind of a frisky Wake Forest squad. It's another one of those teams that's in the thick of things in the ACC. They do have 2 conference losses already, but they're hanging with everybody, and they just pulled off a victory against last year's ACC champ, Southern Methodist, this past weekend. So I think they're flying a bit under the radar as well. And Jake Dickert came over from Washington State this year and has done a really good job of adapting to that new program. And one of the features is a couple of Canadian transfers, one on either side in the trenches. Near Gatkuth, a guy you might recognize from us talking about his time at Colorado State, has made the move over. He's getting limited snaps, but has made a few splash plays here and there for them. So he's a guy to keep your eye out for on the defensive side. And on the offensive side, Melvin Siani came over after his freshman year at Temple. And Temple, by the way, not known as a football powerhouse. Well, Siani earns his way into the starting lineup at left tackle and has been very good for Wake Forest, particularly in the run game. They have a star running back named Damon Claiborne there, who's really been driving their offensive attack. If they can get that going, they'll have a shot here, but they have a tough one as they go to Tallahassee to play Florida State. They're about a touchdown underdogs in this game. I wonder if that's selling them short a little bit. Florida State's kind of in shambles again after a really impressive opening win against Alabama. They've fallen flat a couple times, and Mike Norvell's back on the hot seat. So it's not all roses and sunshine in Tallahassee, and Wake Forest has an opportunity to really take advantage of that and make a statement that they're for real this weekend.
As for U Sports, I like the Canada West playoffs. I always have. You get plenty of upsets, but the big upset this past week was in the OUA, so I guess you're turning your gaze over there.
Well, I am, and we talked a couple weeks ago about looming potential rematches, but because the OUA reseeds, this Western loss just reshuffles the deck and it changes the matchups. So Guelph's reward for being Western on the road is they now go get to tackle Laurier on the road and see if they can get through that one as well. And it's not unprecedented for a team to potentially do that, but that's a heck of a tall task. But the more interesting matchup is we get a rematch between Queens and Windsor. And yes, most of these games are rematches at this point in the year, but it was just 2 weeks ago that, I guess 3 weeks ago by the time the game's played, that Queens hosted Windsor and lost by a field goal in what was a very good game at Queens homecoming. So Windsor went in and made a statement there. Queens has a chance to return that favor on a long road trip that historically has not been very kind to them. So it's a very interesting setup for them, and a Windsor squad that has put up a really tough defense this year, especially against the pass. That's going to be Queen's biggest challenge in this one. Both teams can run the ball very well. Windsor actually outrushed Queens in their first game, but both teams, their lead backs averaged over 8.5 yards a carry in the first game. It's a matter of whether they're going to be able to balance it with an effective passing attack, especially given that the weather may or may not be a factor at this time of year as well. So that will be, I think, the most interesting playoff game across the country. Everything's always interesting out west, and I'm sure there's some chaos in store for us. But for me, because the storyline's underneath it, I think this one's the one I'll be keeping an eye on closely.
Well, Gord, speaking of inhospitable road trips, we'll do this again next week here in this place on YouTube because I will be in Paris hosting. Maybe that's not all that inhospitable. I'll be enjoying Paris, but then I'll take some time out to do this. For everyone on Gridiron Nation, this is Jim Mullin saying, "Ousgang to the game."